All right. So the fifth house. So the fifth house is another dharma or life duty, life purpose house. It is that way along with the first, fifth, and ninth because it's the trikona houses are also the dharma houses. So it rules children, especially your own children. Or children that'll be brought into your infinite life. It can show a partner's children, or there can be seventh, fifth lord connections to where you have a partner who brings a child into your life. Or you can also, for example, be a childless pediatrician could have a prominent fifth house. Children play a huge role, but it tends to indicate that person's own biological children as a general rule. It can rule adopted children, etc. So intelligence, the mind, past life credit, which is known as purva punya, speculation, such as stocks, etc., outright gambling, sports, art in the form of painting or drawing, morals, merit, charity, religiosity, romance, love affairs, pleasure, mantras. It's kind of a rare indication in the West, although Vedic astrology uses mantras, so we'll get to that later. Spiritual techniques, wisdom, high learning, kingship, and good deeds. So the two really primary indications with the fifth house and the fifth lord are children, especially biological children. Then it can represent adopted children, or you're the step parent, or it can represent maybe a daycare provider, an elementary school teacher, a pediatrician, something like that. But those are all increasingly less likely. But it also shows past life credit. And you really need to look at where the fifth lord is to determine what it's saying about that person's past life credit. Believe it or not, everybody has gifts. A lot of people go to their graves with their gifts untapped, unfortunately. But everyone has gifts. And so you can see that from the fifth house. It just requires creativity because some of those gifts are not in alignment with mainstream society. So you have to really look at where it is. And so I say, as an indicator of past life credit, which usually shows in what area soul has past life credit, that will come through usually in a positive way. Some people allow it to go untapped, to have it in like the sixth house or the eighth house or the 12th house, and that's a shame. I teach people how to tap into the sixth, eighth, and 12th houses in a positive way and to lean into those indications. And so where I disagree with a lot of traditional astrologers based on personal experience is that I see potential positives when there's fifth lord house or association with the sixth, eighth, and 12th houses. It does tend to mean that if the person's experiencing it unconsciously, that it's going to be negative. But if that person is able to be conscious and leans into the indications that are positive of the 6th, 8th, and 12th houses, it can be really positive. So there are actually positives that can do manifest in all those areas. For example, a traditional Indian scholar might say, oh, that person is fifth lord in the 12th house, their past life credit is lost. Well, sometimes that person who has the fifth lord in the 12th house, they could be a drug addict, right? And they lose their children for some period of time. And then they have seclusion, right? They have to go to rehab. And they maybe even go through prison at some point. And they, one of their or several of their buddies OD on meth or heroin. And they then therefore also experience death, but also be institutionalized or have prison time or be in rehab, perhaps mandated rehab. So it can also show someone who has a powerful destiny in foreign lands with foreigners, or working as a death doula, someone that works with grief counseling, someone who's in palliative care, hospice, or a counselor in a prison, because prisons are ruled by 12th house, again, involuntary seclusion. Someone who works in the hospital. Nobody really wants to go to the hospital except for maybe the hospital administrator getting paid bank, the doctors and nurses too, perhaps. But it's kind of involuntary seclusion. So someone could have fifth lord in the 12th house, perhaps, and maybe it's exalted. And so they're a pediatric surgeon in a hospital, and they save all these children's lives. They go right up to the edge of death, getting a child in an ICU pediatric surgeon, and they save that child. So that's a way it could manifest. Now, if you lean in to these 6th, 8th, and 12th houses, you can experience those houses consciously rather than unconsciously, and so it can be positive. And I go into that more in some other interpretation classes. So the 5th house can also indicate children, both one's own and that of their partner, in some instances marrying a single parent or working with children such as a pediatric dentist, pediatrician, obstetrician, right, catching those babies, working on a children's television show or movie, being a midwife, catching babies again, a lot of baby catchers here, daycare, you gotta catch those babies. They're, they lay there and can't even move. You gotta catch them. Daycare provider or an elementary school teacher. So usually it indicates the person's own children, but if you find someone has a powerful 5th lord of house and no children, and the prospects are unlikely they're going to have children, say perhaps a woman in her 50s, she might be an incredible pediatrician. She could be an elementary school teacher, or perhaps an elementary school principal, right? Or even a school administrator who works and oversees several schools filled with children but doesn't have children themselves. So it also, again, if their children just aren't involved at all, it shows past life credit then exclusively. But it's very rare that it doesn't in any way indicate children some way, unless the 5th house indication is no children. So if you have like Saturn in the 5th house, or the 5th lord is debilitated or fallen. But usually if someone has a very powerful 5th house and 5th lord, they almost always have children. And it's interesting because it implies that children are a gift and a blessing that's given to you because you've shown tremendous skill in previous lives. It's interesting because it's definitely harder raising children than being single, because being a single adult, I've been both. I was 32 when I had my son, and so having done both, it's certainly harder to be a parent. I don't think there can be any real debate about that. That doesn't mean that some people aren't terrible parents. They certainly are. And it's also like, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it's also the best thing I've ever done. Just having a baby and then raising a child. And, now my son is 14 and a half. And so, almost 15. And so seeing him become a young man, and I see it, my 5th lord lines up in many, many ways with my son. So it's usually those two are interlinked, and I find that to be very interesting. It's almost like you have to earn the right to deal with another human. It's odd, it takes odd combinations for someone to have a lot of kids and then just be disinterested in parents and a bad parent. It does happen, obviously, but it's pretty rare. Usually people who have this powerful 5th lord also just kind of like have a lot of merit in general. So it's not always true, but it is true often. So the 5th house is the first trikona beyond the 1st house. And the trikona or the trinal houses, they're the most auspicious, most just unmitigated good. The planet, if a planet rules the 5th house, it's automatically a benefic. You don't need to know anything else about it. It could be Saturn, and it rules the 5th and 6th houses, right? With that would be a Leo ascendant. Excuse me. It would be a it'd be a Virgo ascendant. A Virgo ascendant would have a 5th and 6th lord Saturn, and then it would become a functional benefic, because the 5th house is good. And it's the second of them, so it's kind of the middling impact. It's quite impactful and powerful, but the 9th house is the ultimate trikona house and the most powerful of them. So yeah, that is the 5th house. And the karaka, or indicator of the 5th house, and therefore children and past life credit, is Jupiter. All right. And just to continue, forgot to say this, If you're interested, I will be teaching astrology classes probably sometime in late October or early November of 2023. And then I am doing astrology readings through elite for natal charts, which is the first 40 years of life, and Navamsa, the last 40 years of life. And I am doing that at least through the end of October 2023. At some point, I'll be switching into working for a company. And at that point, I'll be doing far fewer and maybe no readings whatsoever, except for returning clients. So if you're interested, now's the time to book. Thank you and have a great day. Bye.